binding on the person who's going to make a decision. And in the absence of the other documents, that's very helpful. There's also a document called a living will, and that is a more detailed instruction, kind of what I was talking about, the values and the detail about what you want. And even if you put things in there that are not legally enforceable, it at least lets the world know what you want. And I've had people handwrite that all out, pages of it. That's okay. It can be cryptic too, so.
Yeah. But I think the other thing about the living trust, well, is at least you know somebody, again, has the power to pay the bills.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
The financial part of all of this is very important because we've been focusing on the healthcare power. But if they don't have access to the money, then they can't really do anything. They're going to be, either they can't get to it, or they're going to be reliant on someone else to pay the bills for the decisions they make, and sometimes that causes some conflict.
Right. So you need to know, and sometimes you could have one person that has the health power and one that has the financial power. And again, sometimes that can create, I think, some conflicts too.
It does sometimes. Again, as a lawyer, I see conflicts more than most people do. Right. But both of those people have what we call a fiduciary obligation, meaning that they have to put the needs of the beneficiary above their own, and they have to make decisions in the best interest of that person. And so they must work with the other person to make that happen. And if they're not doing that, again, back to the court. So.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, let's see here. A big item that is on a lot of people's minds, particularly senior people, again, as their health is failing, is whether they can stay in their home. And so maybe you should talk about that a little bit, and what are the alternatives, and without getting into too much depth, because there's so many choices in a sense.
Right.
But nonetheless, a lot of people would prefer to stay on their homes, but I've also seen many cases where it wasn't really practical, and financially, let's just say it was a huge burden, and basically I saw estates evaporate because of this decision, because of the expense of the caregivers. So without giving too much away of the plot, but anyway, so why don't you talk about that for a few minutes?
Well, let's call it the person who has the illness or who is aging may decide that that's what they want to stay in their home. And some people have put provisions in their will or trust or their healthcare powers that no matter what, they want to stay in their home, and it doesn't matter if they spend all their money. Since it's their money and their life, then that's a binding directive. But it may not be feasible for them to stay there. For example, people say that, but they may not understand how expensive that really is. Right. So they may not, as a practical matter, really have the money to do that. It also may not be practical for other reasons. They may need more care and supervision than their money will provide, or it may just not be safe for them to stay there. For example, you can't really lock someone in, and they may be going for the door every time somebody blinks, and so they're off down the street. So that might not be the best situation. But overall, most people say at least that they would like to stay in their home. Now, I've had the experience throughout my career that many people who say they want to stay home, when it's not possible and then they're moved to some other or living arrangement, a facility, for example, they're very happy there because they imagine something much worse than, particularly in that generation. My own mother, for example, she was so against going into a facility, and it was when we took her to lunch at these facilities and she saw what it was really like. She said, I want to go. Yes. She was after the food. And there are a lot, my mother was a very social person, so there are people to make friends with and activities that go on so that they're no longer isolated. She was widowed. So it can be a good thing to move, even if a person thinks it's not. Moving to, there are in the Bay Area, we enjoy a huge range of choices in assisted living facilities, and not to talk them up because that's not something that you want to get to the point where you have to have. But sometimes they have independent living apartments in them, and you can begin to patch the services onto. They have, sometimes contract agencies or the facility provides just the amount of services you need. For example, if you need help with just bathing, they can do that. Medication, they can do that, or they can do a whole array. And there are smaller places called board and care homes that are in private homes that have about 6 residents, and usually, someone will go looking at these places and then select one that has a population that they feel comfortable with. So that's a more home-like environment, but they don't have the activities and the social variety that they would in the other places. So that's something to consider. People can stay in an assisted living facility for a very long time. They're like very nice apartment complexes, and many of them also have dementia units, so that if you have that kind of progressive disease, that you can stay in the same facility and move into a different unit. And some of them have nursing homes on their grounds, so that's also possible. So if one has to move out of their house and they can afford that, living in an assisted living facility, I recommend they take a look at it. It's not for everyone, but some of them are very nice, and a lot of people are very happy there.
Yeah. I just had a situation again with my own father-in-law. He was adamant that he didn't want to be in one of these places, but he had a scary experience, a spill, basically walking home from the supermarket one day, and he went home and he said, "Gosh, what if something happened to me? What would I do?" And so then he became a little more open-minded to look, and then we did find a place actually that he liked, and they called and said, we've moved him up the list, we'd love to have him. And so when they took him back, he said, "So when can I move in? I'm ready to go now. I want to move now."
Right.
So so you never know. And,
well, they're like fancy hotels, and you have service and friends and activities, and it's not bad. I've seen some I thought, oh my goodness, cooking and cleaning for me. I like that.
Okay.
So,
Well,
I just wanted to mention the nursing home option.
Okay.
That many people can't move into an assisted living facility. I've had occasion when I have clients who just weren't acceptable because they were too sick, and so they do have to go to nursing homes. And again, there are some really nice ones. If you have the money to pay, you can get into some really fancy ones, and then there's long-term care insurance, but also usually your health insurance policies don't cover any custodial care at all. Medicare only covers short-term after you get out of the hospital. So if you're going into a nursing home as custodial care, meaning you're going to be there for a long time and you don't have acute medical problems.
We have to wind it up, Betty.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for being with me today.
Yeah,
Betty
welcome.
doesn't have a website because she has so much business that she just doesn't really need one. But if you need to get in touch with her phone number, 408-874-0990. I'm Michael Gray, CPA. You can reach me at michael@financialinsiderweekly.com.
And thank you very much for having me.